Hello and welcome to our virtual back to school night. It's always a disappointment that we can't have this night in person and feel the energy and meet all of you. But I'm glad you're taking the time to watch this video. Hopefully you're here for Advanced Algebra Honors, otherwise known as Algebra 2 Honors. My name is Andrea Miller, formerly Smith, and I'm your child's teacher this year. A little bit about me. This summer, my husband and I braved the pandemic and ended up getting married. We had an 8-person wedding outside to try and keep things as safe as possible. I do like to spend a lot of time outside in general, and I spend a lot of that with my dog. We go on some walks and some hikes and things like that. So what this course is all about is families of functions. So that's our big premise, is we are going to study all of the different algebraic families of functions, different types of functions that they're going to need as they move on to pre-calc and calculus. You can see the list there of those different families of functions. And within each family, we're going to have a thorough working. We're going to be able to solve their equations and inequalities, write equations, graph them, work through their inverses, work through the modeling and the application problems. And then there's always a couple of skills specific to each type of family, depending on what that family is. For example, we're coming up on quadratics, and it's going to be really important for students to be able to move fluently through the different forms of a quadratic, standard form and factored form and vertex form, to be able to solve different problems as we go. Your students will need a graphing calculator for this class. The recommended model is a TI-84, or some of them have the TI-84 Plus. That's fine too. But we will start to use it as a powerful tool, and it'll continue to be used in pre-calculus and calculus, and most math classes in college will ask you to get something very similar. This class can be difficult for some students, especially with that gap year between Algebra 1 in 8th grade and then this class in 10th grade with geometry in the middle. That sometimes can be very tricky. So if your student's in that boat or just wants to make sure that they are on top of all of the material, there's a couple of ways we can make that happen. The first is the Math Lab. So that's offered during the day, during your students' DRs. And it's meeting virtually via Google Meet. So they could access that support whether it was an in-person day or an at-home day. The schedule is on the math department website, and the entry code is MathLab 2021. So it does not a specific meeting. They'll just enter the meeting nickname right here, and that teacher, they'll be entered into the meeting with that teacher. I offer office hours as well via Zoom on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays. But I encourage your students to please reach out. If these times don't work for you, or if you want to set up an appointment to go over something in particular, I would love to do that. I'm here to help support and help your students succeed in this class. So emailing me if those times don't work for you is a great option. What class looks like this year is very similar whether your student's at home for the day or if they're in the building. I know some teachers are really utilizing asynchronous work when folks aren't in the building, but we're not doing a ton of that. We might do that as like a little homework assignment to review an idea or something like that. But for the most part, your students will be on Zoom when they're at home with us, engaging in class discussions and working on some group work problems in breakout rooms. Same thing in the room, but of course they won't be sitting next to their group mates. They'll kind of have some distance between them. Grading this year is going to be the same grading categories it typically would. We'll have quizzes, we'll have tests. They will just be online versus on paper. So students are asked to complete their work on a piece of paper and then take a picture and upload that so they can show all the work supporting their answers. In addition to quizzes and tests, we have 2 categories of grades that students can totally master, meaning that they have the opportunity to redo until they master it. The first is Delta Math, which is a online skills practice, which really helps students beef up their foundational skills needed for that particular week and make sure that they're good to go on those, such as like factoring, or this week coming up, it's a review of the concepts we're learning in class. So they're great skill and foundational practice to make sure your student understands the concepts of what's going on, and then we'll take them a little bit further on like classworks and homeworks and things like that. We also do some graded classworks, and students will have the opportunity to work together or to ask questions as that's happening. And as needed, they could come back and redo that. If one didn't particularly go well, they could give it another shot. Grading this year is going to look a little bit different because we're testing out the standards-based grading model. So like I just mentioned, the quizzes and tests, those are staying the same. That's a traditional way of doing that. But instead of getting a 92 on a quiz, your student is going to get a score for each of the learning outcomes measured in that quiz. So we just finished our first test, and I think there was 10 learning outcomes. So your student's score is going to be a rubric, and for each of those learning outcomes, they're going to get a score of 1 to 4. Where 4 is a thorough understanding of the concept. They've totally mastered it. They've got it. And a 1 is that they really don't have it. They need a lot more practice in that skill. So the idea behind this is to help students pick out and specifically understand what skills they've got mastered and what skills they need extra practice on. So that when that learning outcome shows up again on the next quiz or test or classwork, whatever it happens to be, your student has done the work in between the assessments to master or to understand what they previously did not, and now this comes up again and they can master it. So I think it's a strong advantage to students. It really helps them take ownership of their learning, which is awesome. The downside is that it doesn't translate well to PowerSchool. So what is going to be shown on PowerSchool this year is homework scores, just based on complete or not complete, not graded homework, but did the student attempt it? Where a 1 is complete and a 0 is not complete, just to help you keep up with, is your student keeping up with the class and trying all the assignments, that sort of thing. And then about 3 times a semester, we're going to have some standard-based grade updates. So your student and I will sit down together probably about 5 minutes, and we'll go through what they're on pace to receive for the semester and what they could do to potentially change that, to raise it higher as needed. So how all of these learning outcomes are translating to an actual grade is from this table. A more detailed explanation of this can be found in our syllabus and specifically in the student evaluation document attached to the syllabus. So please use that as a reference. This is just a little bit of an overview. But what's going to happen is your student is going to get a score on all of the learning outcomes for the semester. And the score is going to be somewhere between a 1 and a 4. And then we're going to average all of their scores all semester long. And depending on where their average is that's the base of their letter grade. And then the community engagement score can raise their grade. So if your student meets the community engagement score of their letter, then they'll keep a B. Let's say if your student earned a B, and then they met this expectation, they would stay with the B. If they exceeded this expectation, so let's say they scored at least a 3 on 4 expectations, then they would get the B+. And the same thing would be true if your student did not meet that community engagement expectation. Their grade would get lowered to a B-. So it is definitely possible in this class to earn an A+ if your student is on top of the content and has scored an average between 3.5 and 4, and is a really valuable member of our community and is coming to class prepared every day, engaging in class discussions, asking questions when they have them, providing feedback to me, to their peers, anything, those sorts of things. Thank you so much for coming tonight. As I said, there is a more detailed version of this in the syllabus if you want to check that out. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions or concerns you have about the class or about your particular student. The best way to reach me is via email, milleran@wellesleyps.org. And I'm looking forward to a successful year with all of your students. Have a great night.